So at this point, you've used your computer and other sources to find a whole bunch of good information, hopefully. And hopefully you've whittled it down to the studies that have the highest value, are from the best or highest quality sources, and are most relevant to your question, your population, your outcomes, etc. Now's the time to put on your thinking cap and figure out what it all means. And this is the fun part, I think, is coming up with a way to apply what you found to your problem. So the next step, step 4 of the 5 A's, is apply. So you have to now make some decisions utilizing your best evidence. So if your goal was to create an off-season program for your soccer athletes to enhance their endurance, capacity, reduce fatigue, etc., now's the time to take all the things you've learned and put it into practice in building a program. That would include things like, what type of exercise are you going to do? What are the acute variables? Like, is it intervals? How long are the intervals? How many intervals? What's the rest period between the intervals? What does the evidence say about all of these things to provide the greatest amount of benefit to our athletes? What helps to answer this question the best? So we have to make decisions utilizing the evidence that's available, relying most heavily on the best quality, the highest quality evidence, and less on the lower quality evidence, but still keeping it in mind because it's still potentially helpful. Okay, so applying this information is going to be key. So applying your evidence, obviously, as I said, first you rely on the higher quality evidence. So we take those systematic analyses or the meta-analyses first. Then we also look at the relevance of the articles. If you found a great article but on how to reduce fatigue in athletes, but it's cross-country runners, still might have some useful information, but the demands of cross-country are very different than soccer. So maybe we can't, even though it's a high-quality source, it isn't as relevant as maybe some of the other sources that aren't as high quality. So we really have to examine the articles not just for their quality, the highest quality first, but also their relevance to your population, also the relevance to the goals and the preferences of your clients or athletes. And given all this, we then have to create an intervention. In this case, we have to design our exercise program based upon all of that information we found, right? And that's the fun part, is really putting it into practice and designing a program or an intervention or a treatment or whatever it may be for our clients and our athletes. After we apply and design this program, but before we actually start doing it, we have to put together an assessment plan. So this assessment plan allows us to evaluate our outcomes of applying the evidence. So if our goal was to enhance endurance capacity, reduce fatigue, we need to have a way to measure that. We have to come up with ways to measure it. Maybe we're going to measure VO2 max using a metabolic cart. Maybe we're going to do a series of sprints with a set time in between them and look at the drop-off in sprint speed to look at speed endurance type factors. Whatever it is, we need to decide that up front. What are we going to use to measure the outcome? And we have to then make a plan for assessment. If possible, it's nice to get some pre-data, right? It's nice to know what is their fatigue levels, what are their fatigue levels like, or their endurance capacity like, before we institute this program. And then what is it at the end of the program? We might even want to assess somewhere in the middle of the program. If we're doing a 3-month-long program, we might want to do some type of an assessment partway through, right? So we have to come up with some type of assessment throughout this program to really let us evaluate whether or not it's effective. So we have to come up with a plan for evaluating our program. The measures of effectiveness that we'll use, often we can get also from the literature we found. Probably when you were researching this, you found a number of ways to assess endurance capacity. Some of these are great measures that you would like to use, but you don't have the equipment or the ability to actually use them. So you have to focus on outcome measures that you can actually measure. You need to have the equipment, the expertise, etc., to do those measures. Outcome measures aren't just always, physical measures like VO2 max. They can be measures of satisfaction, enjoyment, time spent doing an activity, whatever it may be. Okay, so we have to think about what kind of measures we're going to do. We have to determine the frequency of the measurement. If you're looking at VO2 max, it's silly to measure it every day they come in to work out. It's silly to measure it really every week because it changes gradually over time. So we might only measure at the beginning and the end of a 3-month period. Our sprint endurance testing, though, maybe that we test every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. Whatever you think is going to help you chart progress, help you use that improvement to motivate your clients or your athletes or what have you. So keep that in mind. You also have to consider how you're going to utilize the pre-test, post-test, and so on. This might be something you want to share with your coach. This may be information that you're going to use and present at a conference somewhere. So consider how you're going to utilize the information before you actually gather it. If you're planning on using the information for a research study and so on, you're probably going to have to apply for IRB approval to get approval to utilize human subjects in research, right? So you have to think about how you might be utilizing this information, how you might be presenting it, and so on. A quick note about outcomes measures. I really like having data, right? I think it's really helpful to know where a person is at a given point in whatever the outcome measure is at the start and at the end, and then chart change over time. So outcome measures, though, you want to pick ones that are relevant, that are going to be important for your client, right? So it could be body mass, it could be weight, it could be measures such as performance variables like 40-yard dash time, vertical jump height, VO2 max, 1 mile time. There are a lot of different performance variables we can use that we can measure. Some very easy to measure, some require complex equipment. We can use physical measurements like weight, body composition through BMI, or if you're lucky enough to have a bod pod or something like that, maybe that's how you measure body composition. We can measure girth. That could be waist girth to measure, again, have some aspect of body comp, or measure the girth of an extremity to look at muscle mass increases. Could be volume of the lungs using a spirometer. They're physical measures you might take. There are subjective measures, such as happiness scores, pain level, satisfaction with the new program, etc. Those might be of interest to you. They can be things like pathology incidence rates. Of the 100 athletes that did this program, how many of them got injured, or how many of them injured this structure, etc. Or disease incidence rates. So you implement a new health and wellness program at your workplace, and you measure how many injuries there are on the job after that, or the prevalence of a disease over the long term, etc. They also can be, outcome measures could be usage statistics. You get a new piece of equipment for your gym, and you measure how many people use it, how often it's used. Was it worth it? Is it something that we should have purchased, and so on, or should we get a second one? So there's lots of different outcome measures that you might utilize in helping to see if your program or your intervention was effective. So all in all, your assessment should be designed to measure if you're achieving your goal or your client's goal. Sometimes you can directly measure what their goal is. If their goal is to lose weight, you can directly measure their weight. If their goal is more nebulous, like get more healthy, we have to choose outcome measures that get towards that outcome but don't directly measure wellness. So you have to be creative sometimes in coming up with your outcome measures and choosing ones that you can truly measure, or you have the equipment and expertise to measure.